Hi everyone, and welcome to this video where we look at another member of my classic computer collection. And today we're going to examine an iconic computer from the 1980s, the original Apple Macintosh. So let's have a look at it. Apple Computers introduced the Macintosh to the world in 1984, and it was launched with all the glitz, glamour and marketing prowess that Apple was famous for. Computer Press was excited by this product, which seemed extraordinary and perhaps destined to change the face of computing forever. And in some ways, it did. The Macintosh popularized two concepts we take for granted today, the graphical interface and the mouse. These concepts were not entirely new, though. The two had come together at Xerox Research Labs and was a feature of Xerox's Altos and Star machines. But after seeing what Xerox had done, Steve Jobs had grabbed the concept with both hands, starting a project that would result in the 1983 Apple Lisa. However, the Lisa was large, was expensive, and it was slow. Even before the Lisa was finished, Jobs had moved on. He wanted an appliance computer. This is one you would never need to open or upgrade. It would be a computer that would just work intuitively. Furthermore, it would be fun, funky, and just plain cool. A machine that could compete on price with other business computers of the day. Surrounded by a talented team, Steve Jobs poured all of his boundless passion into this new project. The result was the Macintosh. Here is an advertisement from our 1984 July issue of New Zealand Bits and Bytes. The whole marketing thrust of the Macintosh was that here was a friendly machine that was dead simple to use. A computer for those people that just wanted a productivity tool and a very shallow learning curve. Ironically, the advertisement on the page before the Macintosh one was for the machine that Steve Jobs hoped the Macintosh would compete head-on with, the IBM PC. The gauntlet was thrown down in an innovative advertising clip which most of the US public saw at the NFL Super Bowl in January of 1984. The ad played on the theme of George Orwell's 1984, and it showed the enslaved masses listening zombie-like to a large Big Brother, preaching conformity in a drab, colourless world. This represented IBM PC culture, of course, and suddenly there appears a hero, female no less, who runs into the scene and hurls a hammer at the large screen, shattering the image and its power over the enslaved masses. The Macintosh, at least according to Apple, was a subversive computer from a small rebel company challenging the iron grip of the evil empire, and innovating, liberating David versus a grey, totalitarian Goliath. Marketing's always been a strong point with Apple, and here it was at its very best. So here's my Macintosh. First, a couple of things to get out of the way. Yes, it is a little yellowed. Second, although its case and motherboard both belong to the original first release version of the Mac, the memory's been upgraded from 128k to 512. An 800k floppy drive has replaced the original 400k one, and the machine has upgraded ROMs of the type that you'd normally find on the Mac Plus. Functionality-wise then, it operates like a Mac 512k enhanced model. Here is the keyboard. It has no arrow keys, numeric keypad or function keys. This was an intentional decision by Apple, as these keys were common on older platforms, and it was thought that the addition of these keys would encourage software developers to simply port their existing applications to the Mac, rather than designing new ones around the graphical interface and mouse paradigms. Here's a front view of the main unit, and you can see that little connector on the bottom right. That's where the keyboard plugs in. Here on the back, people that know this machine will notice one unusual thing. A connector on the battery cover on the top right. That's a SCSI port. When I first got this machine, it had a daughter board upgrade which gave it SCSI capability. I'll talk more about this later. Coming down we can see 5 connectors at the bottom. Going from left to right, these are for the mouse, an external disk drive, a printer, a modem, and finally sound output. Here's a useful accessory I got with the machine, an 800k external disk drive. Having 2 drives certainly makes these early Macs less painful to use, as you'll see in a moment. Taking the case off, we can see nice clean hardware inside. I took this photo when that upgrade daughter board was still fitted, and you can see a slice of it here where the SCSI cable is coming from. So here is the motherboard removed, and you can see that daughter board sitting on top. Not only does it provide SCSI capability, but it also allows for further memory expansion via SIMs. In essence, it bumps the machine up to a Mac Plus. I have, however, removed the board. I wanted to make this machine as close to an original as I could, and the board didn't give me anything more than SCSI capability, which was not of interest to me on this machine. But more importantly, it seemed to be a source of instability once I'd put everything back together. I'm sure this was caused by the way the daughter board sat on the CPU using this plastic connector case. The case lined up with the pins on the original CPU, and the daughter board simply sat on top of it, in contact with its pins by friction. If it wasn't exactly aligned just right, there could be problems. So this is what the main board looks like at the moment. It's a standard 128k board, but with socketed Mac Plus ROMs fitted, and modified to take 512k of memory. That modification is the extra IC and the resistors that you can see here on that tiny soldered on daughter board. So let's put the Mac through its paces. Essentially then it's operating as a 512 Fat Mac with an external drive. There goes the bong, which is a signature boot up sound for the Mac. Then we have the blank disk icon saying it wants a boot disk. I'm going to boot this up with System 2, which is a typical version for this configuration. So we'll feed the machine. What we get is a happy Mac, and then it boots into the operating system. Now, to most of you who are watching, this interface looks nothing special. But imagine if you were seeing this for the first time in 1984-85. Just put yourself back to that time. You'd be amazed, and it would probably blow your mind to see this sort of thing on a personal computer. It was so intuitive and such a change from what was around at that time. Sure, the Lisa had a similar thing, but that machine was hugely expensive. The Mac was in the same price range as the IBM PCs, and their interface was nowhere near as user-friendly as this. Here we see the settings, which can be easily changed. There's no need to remember any complex commands. Just boost the sound up a little bit. Look at some other things, and here was a notepad that you could scribble things in, keep little memos and notes that you might want to make as you went through your work. The operating system also had a scrapbook where you could keep not just text but images as well. Anything that you wanted to keep and perhaps reuse later. Take this graph for example. You could copy this material and just keep it to one side to use it later on. That sort of thing was brand new. It was awesome and it was revolutionary. There were a couple of programs that came with the early Macs along with the operating system, and these were MacWrite and MacPaint. I'll just fire these up so you can have a look at them. This is where 512k of memory and an external drive comes in very handy. I can't imagine the amount of disk swapping that could potentially take place here with just one drive and 128k of RAM. Here we are, so let's just type something in. So once we had our text in there, it was dead easy to change fonts, characteristics of the text. I'll just make this italics. You could cut and paste material. So here's the graph from our earlier cut job from the scrapbook. Now, these seem passé now, but in the day,
Manipulating text and graphics as easily as that was just fantastic. I work at a university, and in 1985 I did a lot of writing and formatting on an IBM PC using WordStar. I had colleagues who had Macs. No wonder they had this insufferable air of superiority about them. It was just a fantastic machine for writing. This is the Draw program, MacDraw. Again, it seems trivial now, but at the time it was, wow, it was great. I'll just show you the startup screen of another one of these bundle discs. This took you on a tour of the Macintosh, and it was designed to be used with an audio tape. So you listened to the tape while the computer showed you the various features in sync with the audio. Quite clever. Now the nearest thing to a game on this disc is something called Maze. Here it is. While it's not in colour, the graphics are very crisp and they're very clear. So the idea here is that you move from your start dot to your end dot, and you do this simply by moving the mouse around. So it's good practice for mouse movement. And one thing to remember is that in those times people weren't used to using mice. They were quite foreign devices. We find them very intuitive now, and it's hard to imagine that they would have been strange and unusual objects to people, but they were. So you had games like this to give you some practice at moving the mouse and controlling the pointer on your screen. You might have guessed I have played this before, which is why I'm doing it fairly quickly. And there's our little reward. I've got 3 original discs, and I think they're the discs that came with those first Macs. There's the Mac Paint Mac Write disc, there's the training disc, and there's the boot disc. Boot disc is not going, so I've got a replacement from the internet. So as far as manuals go, I've got 3. There's this user manual, and like all Apple manuals, these are really well put together. They're on nice quality paper, good glossy photographs, well laid out, a pleasure to read through, and of course it's a good idea for a firm to produce their manuals in a very professional way, because it just reflects on the company, and Macintosh have always been very conscious of that. So that's the user manual. Next we have MacPaint. This is quite a thin manual, but again, like the others, it's very nicely organized. It's got some beautiful illustrations in it, quite colorful. It shows people just how to use the software. And lastly, we have the Mac Write manual. This is much thicker than the MacPaint one. In fact, it's about the same size as the user manual. Like the others, professionally written, good quality paper. Uses the same style as the other 2 manuals, and that's a feature of Apple manuals too. They all look like they're related, a family, so to speak. Yeah, very nice. So how did these early Macs go in the marketplace? Well, initial sales seemed quite promising, but despite Jobs' bravado, the Apple Macintosh failed to knock the IBM PC and clones off their perch. While the Mac design was eye-catching and the graphical user interface way more intuitive than the PC MS-DOS environment, software was hard to write and there was little of it for the machine. Also, the sparse 128k memory of the original Macintosh meant many thumb-twiddling disk-accessing moments when the machine was in use. The 512k Fat Mac remedied this later, but they failed to attract huge sales. In fact, the intuitive look and feel of the computer may have worked against it in the business market. It seemed more like a cutesy toy to hard-bitten executives rather than a serious computer. The IBM PC or AT, on the other hand, well, those were heavy monsters, and those rugged boxes obviously meant business. Jobs, deep in his reality distortion field, refused to accept the Macintosh wasn't succeeding in the marketplace, and this angst was one of the major reasons for his parting of the ways from Apple Computer in 1985. Even though it flunked Business 101, the Macintosh did not die. Through upgrades and hard disk capability, the Macintosh models cornered a small but steady segment of the market in the late 1980s, specializing in desktop publishing, graphic design and education. They were also popular with academics and writers. In conclusion, the Mac was highly influential. It introduced the common man and woman to graphical user interfaces, mice, and 3.5-inch floppy disks, forcing the industry to follow suit. It truly deserves the label of classic computer.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that look at the Apple Macintosh. So until next time, keep well, and we'll see you in the next video.